Earlier, I sat down for an exclusive interview with Vice President Mike Pence to talk impeachment, the Dems' endless efforts to attack this president, and the alleged Ukraine aid controversy. Take a look. Mr. Vice President, thank you for having us here. I know it's a very busy time of year, and we very much appreciate you being on Justice. It's your first time, so welcome to Justice, and thank you for having us here.
Oh, it's great to be here, Jeanine. Thanks so much, and welcome to the White House.
Thank you. All right, let's get right to it. Will the president be impeached?
I don't yet know what's going to happen in the House. I know that Speaker Pelosi has announced articles of impeachment, but I have to tell you, I served in the Congress for 12 years, and I don't think it's a foregone conclusion.
Interesting.
That the Democrats will be able to get the votes to pass articles of impeachment, because I hear from people all over the country the support for this president, the progress that we've made rebuilding our military, reviving this economy. I mean, yesterday we announced 7 million jobs created, 180 conservatives on our federal courts. And when people look at the facts in this case, they can read the transcript and see that the president did nothing wrong. I know the American people are going to let their voice be heard in the next 2 weeks. And when the voice of the American people strikes Capitol Hill, anything's possible. You know, I travel all across the country, just as the president does, on a regular basis. We were both just overseas with our troops. And literally everywhere I go, I hear Americans telling me that they couldn't be more proud of the progress this president's made. We have a stronger, more prosperous America. Our economy is booming. This is a president who's he's kept more promises than he made to the American people. And all they see the Democrats doing, not just in this Congress, but for the last 3 years, is endless investigations and a partisan impeachment, all in an effort to overturn the results of the 2016 election. You know, it's really ironic that Speaker Pelosi says that they're defending democracy. What they're trying to do is overturn the results of our democratically elected president who won the election, won a landslide in the Electoral College. And I think the American people see through it. I think they see this is the Democrats are beating up on this president because they know they can't beat this president in 2020.
Well, they've as much as said it, but they're not just beating up or beating on the president. They're beating on you, because the impeachment report says that they say proves their case for impeachment and mentions you in it as having been, quote, either knowledgeable of or an active participant in what they say was this illicit plan to extort the Ukraine president. What is your response to that?
Well, first, there was no illicit plan to extort the Ukrainian president. Let's begin with the fact the president released the transcript. There was no quid pro quo. President Zelensky has said as recently as the last week that there was no pressure placed on Ukraine. Witnesses that actually testified before the Democrat committee actually testified that the subject of investigations never came up, either before, during, or after my meeting with President Zelensky in Poland. What we did talk about was what President Trump asked me to ask about. And, you know, I generally don't talk about what President Trump and I discuss, but he gave me the authority to do that now. I mean, when he asked me to go to Poland to represent him, he'd already scheduled a meeting with President Zelensky. And the president sat me down and said, look, we're reviewing this aid, but he said, I want to know what he's doing about corruption. I mean, President Zelensky was literally elected in a landslide, and a parliamentary election for his party was a landslide on an anti-corruption agenda. And the president said to me, find out what he's doing on that. In a sense, you know, check him out, see what you make of him on that. And secondly, he said, ask him what he's going to do about soliciting more European support. Because the president for the last 3 years has been frustrated with the fact that while this administration has provided military aid, where the last administration only provided blankets and meals to Ukraine. Right. We look at our European partners, and they just haven't been there for Ukraine. So he said, go ask him about what he's doing about corruption, ask him what he's doing about more European support. And that's what I talked to President Zelensky about. And people that testified on Capitol Hill said as much. Those were the issues we focused on exclusively. And when I came back, reported that back to the President of the United States, literally 10 days later, he released all of the aid to Ukraine, no strings attached. But the fact is that in my case, I'm still not aware that there was a quid pro quo. I mean,
Well, I don't know
I'm
that
still
they're
not aware
saying
that there
quid
was
pro
ever
quo
any
anymore.
effort
I
to
think
tie
now they've
Ukrainian
moved it
aid to investigations.
to abuse of power. You know, that somehow betraying the country, the Constitution. It's this amorphous kind of thing. We're no longer at quid pro quo, bribery, extortion. But
Right.
regardless of whether the president did anything wrong, I mean, it appears very likely that he will be impeached by the House, unless, of course, you know Washington better than I do, and anything can happen. But if he is...
Well, anything, that's what I want to say to your viewers. And
Okay.
Jeanine, you've been such a stalwart voice over the last 3 years about the rule of law and stood up with this president and our administration. But I want to say to your viewers, never underestimate the impact of the voice of the American people. I mean, Speaker Pelosi has announced that they're going to write articles of impeachment. But the simple fact is that there's more than 31 Democrats in Congress who are in districts that the president carried in 2016. And I've been to many of those districts as we've been traveling around the country to try and get this Congress to pass the USMCA, which will be the largest trade deal in the history of this country. And as I've gone to those districts, I know how strongly people feel about President Trump. People come out to the airport, they come out to the events, they stop me on a street corner and they just say, tell the president that how much we appreciate what he's done to rebuild our military, revive this economy,
So what
appoint
does that
conservatives
tell
to
you?
our courts. And I really believe that if the American people will let their voice be heard, especially to those Democrats that just arrived a year ago on Capitol Hill, we'd still have a chance to set this partisan impeachment aside and in the balance of this year, focus on the things that will make our country more prosperous and more secure. I mean, Jeanine, that trade deal has been waiting action for over a year. We estimate that it will create between 200,000 and 500,000 American jobs if they pass the USMCA.
But given the fact, as you say, that when you go to the districts where those 31 or whatever the number is of the Congress people, the Democrats are running in Trump-inclined districts, the fact that she would be willing to virtually throw them or cast them aside tells you that their disdain, and that's a very light word for this president, it is overwhelming. Why do they hate this man so much?
Well, I think it has something to do with the fact that to one degree or another, I think for more than a generation, the liberals in this country have been having their way. Not just in the national media, but in much of government policy. We've seen government get bigger. We've seen our military get weaker. We've seen government, with more regulations and more taxes suppress economic growth. We've, of course, seen our courts sliding to the left with judicial appointments from successive administrations. And what President Trump did in that election in 2016 was essentially plant a flag in the ground and said, we're going to go back to what we know makes America great, and we've made America great again. We've rebuilt our military.
But wouldn't
we
they
cut
want
taxes,
that?
rolled back regulations.
Wouldn't the Democrats want that? They're Americans.
Well, of course they are. But we're talking about party leaders that have been having their way for a very long time. And here's a president that said, look, we're going to put American workers first. We're going to put America first on the world stage. And look at what we've done. With the tax cuts, regulation, unleashing American energy, opening markets, standing for free and fair trade, 7 million new jobs as of Friday of this week, unemployment at a 50-year low, wages are rising at the fastest pace in 50 years.